Mission completed. You don't have to come back to Shanghai. Head straight to Dongbei, find Cheng Xiao and Hung, then seize all the statue pieces the Japanese army has. Once accomplished, count the number of pieces in our possession. If the statue would be a whole, make for Shangzi. Otherwise I will join you to start the final plan. Xian said to a silver plate. Final plan? What plan? Wang Xia's voice came through the silver plate along with the loud whistling of the wind. Wang Xia was flying the sky stick over the Pacific Ocean to the direction of Shanghai. He contacted Xian to report as advised beforehand shortly after leaving the battlefield and asked for his next mission. It was surprising that Xian would decide to go to Dongbei himself for his final plan. Xian had been managing the information coming from the three powers in Shanghai this whole time. What could this final plan be? To bombard Dongbei with nukes? Raise Tokyo? There's only a third of the time limit left. I can't guarantee we could obtain the last piece of information in such a short amount of time. So we would have to initiate the final plan. Xian said. Wang Xia was shocked. He mumbled the words raise Tokyo several times before yelling, this is your final plan? What kind of plan is that? Relish the final chance with massacre? Have you given up? I have just destroyed a US fleet and now you target Tokyo? The injustice from killing the innocent sailors finally erupted from him. Officer Wang Xia. Xian shouted. Obey your orders. Wang Xia paused and calmed down. Several seconds later, he said, Colonel Chu Xian, the order I received is to assist you in obtaining resources from this realm. I will follow all your orders on this basis. However, I don't believe raising Tokyo and taking the lives of hundreds of thousands of innocent people will allow us to survive. I refuse to obey this order. A silence came from Xian's end as if he had cut off communication. 10 seconds later, Xian's voice came through. An explanation is troublesome and waste of time, but you are an important force in the upcoming plan. I do not allow you to leave the team at this time. I will only say it once. We are heavily disadvantaged in this bonus mission. First of all, we do not have enough manpower as many of our members have fallen in asleep. Secondly, we do not have enough time to search a large area without sufficient information nor a Psyche Force user. In such times, we have to proceed with unconventional means. This world is nothing more than a parallel world like ID told you from the beginning. We can do anything to it as long as it will help us complete the mission. Wang Xia became impatient, but I don't think raising Tokyo and killing innocent people have anything to do with the mission. I can't imagine the possible reasons. Mortal's wisdom. Xian sneered. We knew the mission is abnormal from the start due to the Saints of the West. The mission is a trap in disguise and it is nearly impossible to complete as we normally would. At least not in the order of gathering information, finding a statue piece, and repeat until we have a whole statue. So. Wang Xia interrupted him. Then why did you follow this process when you know it cannot complete the mission? What secret arrangements reside in your mind? Xian calmly said, there is another arrangement but it's not secret. Remember your first order of defeating the Japanese army that occupied Japan? The order was to defeat and not wipe out the army. We followed it up with nuking the Japanese Navy, defeating a division using only Hung, and then a US Navy fleet. Every battle is a step forward in the plan. The goal is to inform all the powers which possess the statue pieces of our power, a power that transcends all else in this era, a power belonging to mythologies, and to let them know of the importance the Buddha statue has to us. We will go against the whole world for it. Wang Xia said, that's not sensible. The powers in possession of the statue pieces wouldn't hand over them knowing how valuable the pieces mean to us. They would coerce us into working for them or giving them weapons. What does it have to do with raising Tokyo? Xian waited for Wang Xia to finish then said, normally, that's the case, which is why we resort to unconventional means. If we can't find all the pieces in 7 days, then we will make them bring the pieces to us. Not in the form of a trade or satisfying their requests. We will instill them with fear. Our plan leading up to this point has the intention to make them believe we will act more insane the closer time nears the end of 7 days. From an occupying army, to a small fleet, to a division, to a complete fleet, to Tokyo. We are progressing toward insanity with time. The party to be in possession of the final statue piece needs to know that we will raise the world without consideration of anything, even if it comes to destroying the whole of humanity. We are also sending the message that any party who informs us of the statue's location will be handsomely rewarded with wealth and authority. If that party is a sole person, he will obtain wealth and authority equivalent to that of a large organization. To rise high in the world or to perish with it, these are the two choices we give them. Once Tokyo falls, we will split up over the world and destroy any army that comes in sight. On the 7th day, we will begin to raise the world with the magic cannon starting at the coast of the Pacific Ocean. Everyone over the world will receive the broadcast that we will raise a city every 30 minutes, and will wipe off humanity at the end of 24 hours. We are the executioners of Judgment Day. This is the final plan that has begun since you attacked the Japanese army in Shanghai. Do you have any more questions? Wang Xia trembled uncontrollably. He knew Xian had a heart firm as iron, or more accurately, he had no heart. Xian would use everything available as resource to achieve his desired outcome, including the lives of his comrades and his own life, not to mention the lives of the countless innocent unrelated people. And now he had come to include the destruction of humanity in his plan. Not destroying humanity but to use it as a threat to force the party with the statue piece to hand it out. Furthermore, this is not the real world. Make your decision. Do you want to survive or do you want this world to remain intact? Xian corrected Wang Xia. Wang Xia became silent, drowning the racket he was making. After a long pause, he sighed. Are there no other solutions? And do you firmly believe we can gather all the remaining pieces? There is no other solution. We only have 60 to 70% chance of gathering all the pieces of the statue. This is the reason we resort to unconventional means. Xian replied in a serious tone. Because there is no other way, because we lack the conditions to gather the statue, we have to resort to other means. Wang Xia, we are trapped since the start of the mission in an intrigue where we have to catch the only glimpse of light to survive. The saints of the West intended to wipe us. I regret to tell you that my wit alone is not sufficient to break us free. Understand? Which is why I have been saying we will brute force our way through the mission. This plan is built upon pure strength. The final step is the absolute power we possess to break free from the trap. It was truly a crazy plan. Wang Xia was the only person in the team who became aware of the plan. He hesitated for a long time but in the end, refrained from telling the other members. He would reason with Xian prior to accepting the order. However, once he accepted the order, he would remain as nothing more than a soldier. Whether the mission ahead of him was doable or not, whether it led to hell or not, he would not bat an eye. Zero went to Shangzi, so there were only Hung and Changxiao in the northeast region. Only a select few in the team could dissuade Xian from his actions. Neither Hung nor Changxiao came close to Zheng in this respect. Even Zero fared better than them. Coincidentally, Zheng was sleeping and Zero was guarding him in Shangzi. Did he set us up since the beginning? Why else would he choose to send Zero over? Zero's probably the only one who would speak up to him. Furthermore, if an internal conflict breaks out, he's the only other person who would pose a threat to Xian. Wang Xia clapped his head and kicked the thoughts away from his mind. He didn't want to kill innocent people, but he also felt it was the logical thing to do after hearing Xian's rationale. They were not saints after all. If it was the only path to survive, they would walk down this path even if they were to transform into demons. Wang Xia's mind slowly cleared up. Yet, we won't have the strength to kill Hao One if Zheng doesn't wake up on time, which would render all our efforts futile. Pray that the Lambda driver and the mystic eyes of death perception are effective. Why hasn't Zheng woken yet? Zheng wished he could. Living in a dream world for over half a year was incredibly boring. He had established a daily routine of watching the pretty lowly jumping up and down, taking baths and swimming. Aside from these benefits, he was bored to death. Is there going to be an end? It's been so many months already. I might as well show up and explain the situation to her. One of his accomplishments over the past several months was the degree of his emulation of Yinkong. He could come in contact with the dream world for a brief duration during emulation. Furthermore, the higher the degree of emulation, the more power he could use. He also obtained a secret technique to safely step into mid-fourth stage from Yinkong. If this technique was feasible, Team China could become the strongest team in the realm, at a level far surpassing Team Devil and Team Celestial. Ru Yikong was likely a powerful Psyche Force user in the fourth stage. Her Psyche Force was an inborn aptitude. Yinkong discovered an unconventional method to overcome the Heart's Devil, which was to get past it with force. The Heart's Devil would infuse a person's mind with frenzy and violence despite the varied forms of its manifestation in each person. The person would become unable to distinguish friends from foes and attack anyone in proximity. This violence suppressed the individual's consciousness, so unless one could overcome the Heart's Devil, death was the inevitable ending. Yinkong, however, found a way to overcome the Heart's Devil from a different angle. She named it Ascension by Force. To draw an analogy using cultivation, the Heart's Devil of the fourth stage was the Heart's Devil before ascension to immortality. This obstacle posed on the person's mental state and had no relation to his physical strength. When Zheng overcame his Heart's Devil, his strength immediately took a leap into mid-fourth stage. What Yinkong wanted was to suppress this violence completely. She had reached the fourth stage and gained infinitesimal control, although still in its initial phase. At the same time, waves of violent lust thrust into her mind. Ru Yikong drained the violence from her until she couldn't hold it anymore. Once Yinkong recovered from the unlock mode, Ru Yikong would return it back to Yinkong's mind. Without being in the unlock mode at that time, she would become able to suppress the invasion. Wu. How are you feeling? What stage have you reached this time? Almost breaking free of the Heart's Devil yet? Ru Yikong was also a pretty lowly. She lay on the sand exhausted after using her Psyche Force ability. Her face was ruddy like a little apple. She breathed heavily while asking Yinkong. Yinkong also looked exhausted. She rubbed Ru Yikong's face and giggled. You look so cute when you are exhausted. No wonder your brother calls you little apple. You look just like an apple. Ru Yikong's face grew even redder and she slapped Yinkong's hand away. I am not the only one who he calls little apple. He likes to call you little apple when we are not around too. Hee. When are you going to become an apple and let him eat you? Yinkong blushed. She pinched Ru Yikong's face and said, I am still far from meeting the Heart's Devil. But every time I suppress this violence and I grow more accustomed to it and I feel I can endure it a little more. I think if we should continue like this, my conjecture would become true. We can safely enter mid-fourth stage through ascension by force. Ru Yikong let out a sigh of relief seeing Yinkong looking relaxed. Yinkong suddenly clasped her hands on Ru Yikong's face and said in a serious tone. Be honest, Ru Yikong. Is your unlock stage advancing at an increased pace? Is the violence that you held each time increasing the pace of your progress? Ru Yikong laughed as she was going to give an answer. However, Yin Kong stared into her eyes without wavering. She finally nodded in defeat. Yeah. My unlock mode is advancing a little faster, but it shouldn't have anything to do with you. This happened before. And with the method you discovered, the Heart's Devil is no longer so scary. If I end up meeting the Heart's Devil, I can just split the violent lust to everyone. Wouldn't that make it easy for me to overcome the Heart's Devil? Yin Kong said, no. The state you would enter is vastly different from going berserk. How should I explain it? It's a state where your mind is filled with frenzy and violence and your body begins to attack those around you. Yet, you will feel that you exist as a separate consciousness. That's the scariest part of the Heart's Devil. You won't feel you are in a berserk so you can't stop it. It is the reason I am attempting to completely suppress the violent consciousness in order to suppress the Heart's Devil. The path is too difficult to walk. We have only taken the first step in this non-traditional shortcut. I guess I will truly enter mid-4th stage if I can actually overcome the Heart's Devil. Rui Kong, don't test your luck against it. Fine. Fine. Rui Kong quickly diverted the conversation. Speaking of the unlock mode, my brother has only unlocked the first stage. He's so slow. Is it because he lacked the aptitude? Will you ditch him in the future? Yin Kong blushed. What are you talking about? We are not in that type of relationship. It might not be accurate to judge our strength by our unlock stage. As we age, our unlock stage will naturally increase. I actually think your brother is a super genius. He's much more talented than any of us. That's how he can suppress unlocking the genetic constraint. So, Zui Kong might actually be stronger than me. Zhen truly agreed with Yin Kong's statement that Zui Kong could be stronger than her. He might not appear so in this dream world. He was weaker than many of the people around him. However, Zhen had suspected him of concealing his strength given their encounters in God's realm. Perhaps he was suppressing himself from unlocking to the 4th stage. What is the story of the outbreak? The series of events is becoming increasingly puzzling. The gentleness shown by Zui Kong doesn't seem to be an act. Why did he transform into that psychopath after he entered God's realm? Did he kill the friends who grew up with him, which caused the change? Did he fail in the unlocking process? Zhen pondered over the viability of ascension by force as he watched the two little girls. This method appeared dangerous and absurd, but it wasn't without its merit. So far, it seemed viable despite possessing the same degree of risk as the traditional method and requiring a powerful psyche force user. There's actually another shortcut: transfer the violent lust into another person's mind completely without regard to the other person's life. The receiver must be a psyche force user. So the receiver is destined to die and the one battling the Heart's Devil would likely remain safe. I wonder if this is considered a black art. While Zhen was thinking over the matter, the two girls retraced their steps on the beach. The daily routine of dealing with the violent lust ended as dusk approached. By the time they returned to their place of assembly, it would be almost time for dinner. Zhen had grasped the girls' routine after observing them for multiple days. The girls talked and laughed on their way back. The final glimpse of light from the setting sun painted the ocean in gold. It seemed as though the little island stood in the center of this gold. Everything felt so peaceful, just as the half year that Zhen had observed. Today was also going to be a peaceful day. The two girls suddenly looked to each other. Rui Kong could enable communication through the mind since she had the potential of a psyche force user. However, this mean of communication would drain her mental energy rather quickly because her abilities did not fall under the same category. She would only use it briefly during emergencies. Sis, 17 people. Are they ambushing us because we have been coming to this beach the past several days? Rui Kong asked through her mind. Yin Kong nodded and replied in the same manner. Probably. We came here at the same time every day. The bastards should be able to grasp our location. 17 people here, that's the majority of the other two teams. Hee, little Rui Kong, how long do you think it will take us to finish them off? Rui Kong curled her lips and said, under 20 seconds by myself. They have no way of blocking my mental invasion without reaching the 3rd stage. Sis, do you want to go or should I? Yin Kong tightened her hands then frowned. It will be better for you to go. Don't be too harsh. Just teach them a lesson. I just experienced the violence from the 4th stage, so I am afraid I can't hold myself back. Rui Kong nodded without saying anything in reply. She continued walking alongside Yin Kong. Zhen had seen a fair number of fights among the Kong generation of the Assassin's clan. Children who were injected with genetic stimulants were assigned to several teams then dropped onto this uninhabited island. The island was not exactly tiny. It had sources of food and clean water. However, the environment remained poor and dangerous that normal people would be unable to survive. Food came from a variety of sources but in small quantities. Normal people would not dare to catch larger fish like sharks. Inland food sources were few. Among the teams on the island, Yin Kong's team was comparatively better in that they didn't have to worry so much about food. The other teams were basically skipping every other meal. Fights were inevitable and the victors would seize the food and water from the losers. As such, Yin Kong's team had always been a target of the other teams. Yin Kong and Rui Kong were too strong that a whole team might not be able to beat the two of them. After fighting with them for some time, the teams had come to exclude the two girls from any plans. These children were assassins after all, not hooligans on the streets. They would run if the initial attack failed. The other teams did not find the opportunity to ambush the girls until now. For one, they couldn't obtain accurate information regarding the girls' location, and two, they didn't get enough time to conceal themselves for an ambush. The stimulants were very impressive. There were a few children who reached a high unlock stage among the other teams, though not as genius as Yinkong and Ruikong. From the half year of observation, Zheng found 2 or 3 who reached the 3rd stage. If these children overcame their heart's devils, they would become an unimaginable force, stronger than even most players in God's realm. The girls walked into a forest while Zheng was thinking. Several breezes of the wind struck toward Yinkong the moment her foot stepped into the forest. She slapped her hand on a nearby tree and broke off its trunk. The fallen section of the tree blocked in front of her, then came the sound of collisions. Several flying knives pierced into the tree trunk. Hee. Fukong. It's you again. Haven't you learned enough from last time? Yinkong backed a few steps while the tree trunk fell to the ground. On the opposite side, a young man walked out from the shadows. His face was slightly blushing as he looked at Yinkong. Zheng had seen this man before. He reached the 2nd stage and was adroit in assassination techniques. He went against Yinkong several times due to food. Only once did he got caught by Yinkong and received a beating. The rest of the encounters, he managed to escape by relying on his flying knives. Zheng could also tell that he had a crush on Yinkong. Fukong's face turned even redder. His hands moved as though he didn't know where to put them. A laughter came through behind him and he finally calmed his hands. A strong-looking young man walked up from behind Fukong. He was approximately 18 years of age, had a big build almost 2 meters in height and bulging muscle. He only wore a simple fitted shirt as if to display his build. The way he laughed seemed like he was imagining himself as a warrior in ancient times. Despite the young man's silly appearance, his strength was commendable. Zheng had met a lot of the other children during the past half year. This guy and 1 or 2 other were the only people who could go up against Yinkong for a bit. This young man infused assassination techniques into his attacks. Although he still couldn't beat Yinkong, he was strong enough to give her an actual fight. Likong laughed and said, "Enough with your lesson from last time. If I wasn't having a diarrhea from eating too many oysters, you wouldn't get to beat up my underlings. Today is your unlucky day. Admit your defeat and have your team bring over food and water. We won't make things difficult for you little girls." Yinkong curled her lips with contempt and didn't speak a word. She backed off 2 steps, exposing Ruikong in everyone's sight. Ruikong laughed brightly and dashed forward. The 2 girls were approximately 50 meters from the 2 young men. Fukong had readied another knife in hand the moment the girls moved. He was no longer the coy boy from before. His eyes expressed nothing but calmness as they concentrated on Ruikong. He didn't throw the knife off. Likong stepped in front of him when a whistle of the wind came forth. A tiny rock flew into Likong's hand. The impact caused a thump like an airsoft pellet hitting a piece of wood. Yinkong said with a smile, "Don't sneak in ranged attack when you fight in close combat and don't push it too far. Otherwise I will join the fight." Her face was smiling but her eyes felt cold as metal and sharp as a blade. Ruikong had crossed 20 meters in the meantime. She suddenly stepped onto a tree and leaped straight up. Hiding in the crown of the tree were 2 people. Half of Ruikong's combat strength came from her psyche techniques and half came from infinitesimal control in a similar manner to Yinkong's techniques. By confining force in a tiny space and perfecting every attack, each of her movements could inflict fatal damage whether it was a slight push of the hand or a jump kick. This method of attacking possessed enormous power, but it also posed a high level of requirement on the user. The 4th stage was the bare minimum needed to utilize it. Furthermore, when using the same technique, there was still a power difference between Ruikong and Yinkong. Ruikong was much weaker at using this technique than Yinkong. Even so, the power displayed by Ruikong was still immense. She leaped 7 meters from the tree and before the 2 people on the tree crown could react, she had already smacked them off the tree with 2 hits. There was no visible injury on the 2 people's body, though their pupils had rolled off the front of their eyes, signaling that they had fallen unconscious. Fukong readied his knife again as the fight commenced. However, Likong stopped him. The strongly built young man laughed out loud and said, "Since the girl has chosen to fight us alone, it would be shameful if we were to use throwing knives in addition to ganging up on her. Everyone go. Even if it's only one of them, we have to score 1 point back for our comrades." Yinkong was holding a few pieces of rocks in case Fukong decided to use flying knives. She didn't mind that Fukong wouldn't use the flying knives and kept the rocks in her hands. Though Likong's words made her roll her eyes. The man was shameless when they ambushed with so many people and used flying knives. If she weren't standing on the side without joining the fight, they would without a doubt be using the flying knives already. Anyway, similar fights had happened a few times before. Everyone held back a little despite being in different teams. This was not an actual assassination mission after all. Food was part of the reason, but more so that they were looking to get their faces back and for entertainment. Knowing this, Yinkong decided not to join. Ruikong stood on top the tree crown and looked toward Likong with a smile. While Likong stared straight back at her and laughed, over 10 people came out from the forest. These people surrounded the tree Ruikong was standing on from all sides. Ruikong giggled and leaped down on a young man and girl who were dashing at her. The 2 were surprised, but their steps did not waver. Just then, Ruikong snapped her fingers. The girl's expression abruptly changed as she sprung on the young man's back. In just the blink of an eye, Ruikong had already closed in on the young man. He had nowhere to dodge when her fist smashed straight onto his face and he collapsed unconscious. "Be careful." She started using mind control. "Enter the highest stage of your unlock mode. It will at least delay her." Likong yelled. Yet, he was too late. 5 girls had fallen under Rui Kong's control in just this brief moment. Most guys were either knocked out by her or by the girls she controlled. Less than 20 seconds after the fight started, only a few guys were still standing and all the girls had lost control of themselves. Li Kong sighed then said to Fu Kong, who was still on his side, "I am going to go, don't use flying knives. Yin Kong's not going to show mercy. You are simply terrible in close range, so just stand here." He charged at Rui Kong as he laughed. Rui Kong giggled at the muscle man. "We have fought several times already. Your pure power does counter my infinitesimal technique, but your muscle brain isn't going to block my mind control. Do you still want to fight?" "Of course." Li Kong acted boldly. "Why not? Come control me." He had dashed 20 meters while they talked. Every step he took crossed 10 meters distance. His muscle enlarged and looked like a steel armor covering his body. At 8 meters away from Rui Kong, he smashed his fist forward, scraping by a tree on its way. The tree's bark exploded. The wind generated by the smash carried the shredded pieces of the bark to Rui Kong. Rui Kong instinctively shut her eyes. She immediately realized what just happened when another gust of wind approached. This wind was much stronger than the previous attack. She leaped backward as she murmured the word shameless. "What do you mean shameless? Haha, all's fair in a war. And the same in a fight?" Li Kong clearly heard her word. His fist struck the ground where Rui Kong was standing. The power smashed a hole on the ground. He dashed at Rui Kong again, clinging onto the advantage he just obtained. The two people each dashed 10 meters away. Nothing on the way could stop Li Kong's advance. The trees were only a bucket's diameter thick and stood no chance against his fists. Power was not his only trait. His feet moved in a way that supplemented his strikes. Zheng observed as a spectator. Li Kong's power was innate to him. He abandoned dexterous techniques when he reached the second stage and focused his effort on pure power, raising it to an abnormally high level. Zheng recalled their battle against Team India from way back. Team India also had a powerfully built man, but that man was nowhere near as strong as Li Kong, both in the progress of the unlocking the genetic constraint and techniques. Overall, Li Kong was actually quite strong once Zheng tried to make a comparison. He would only hold a small advantage if he refrained from using explosion, destruction, the fourth stage and dragon transformation. Li Kong's attacks chased Rui Kong without giving her a break. The two were similar in close combat level, so it was difficult for Rui Kong to catch up once she lost the initiative. "I can't let this go on. Relying on close combat alone is unfavorable for me. His style literally counters mine. I should use mental abilities. Probably not strong enough to control him since he's in the third stage, but I should at least be able to see his incoming attacks, just like how the previous fight went." Rui Kong made up her mind and snapped her fingers. Her mind immediately came in contact with Li Kong's mind. Li Kong continued chasing after Rui Kong without any change. However, it was impossible to not notice the connection established to his mind. A hint of cautiousness was added to his movements. This was the moment Rui Kong was waiting for. When one was overwhelming his opponent with pure power, the hint of cautiousness became a flaw. He no longer put forth everything he had in this process. Rui Kong's delicate white hand gently held the incoming fist. It appeared so feeble and light, yet her hand guided the fist off its direction. Then her palm struck Li Kong's chest with a thump. As her palm hit the target, she leaped backward. The tide of the battle reversed in the blink of an eye. Li Kong's 2-meter-tall body trembled at the strike. Rui Kong's hand might appear feeble, but infinitesimal control utilized every bit of force at the point of contact. Even a buffalo would have died in that attack. Only those with a superiorly built body could withstand it. Li Kong wiped the blood from his lips and laughed again. "Haha, can't help it. We have similar power level in close combat, only differing by style, so I counter you slightly. But every time you begin to interfere me with your mental ability, you will gain the advantage. It seems like I can't escape defeat if I don't find a way to counter your mental ability." Rui Kong also laughed. "Good that you know it. Do you want to continue? Or do you want me to beat you until you are knocked out like last time?" "Of course we will continue, however, no one can know who's going to get knocked out." Li Kong leaped at Rui Kong again and the fight continued. Rui Kong didn't lose the initiative this round, so the fight was in a stalemate. Though the situation was progressing to a direction unfavorable to Rui Kong. She had a defensive fighting style which was at a disadvantage to Li Kong's style. Furthermore, several of Li Kong's underlings were rushing at the two of them. Rui Kong snapped her fingers once more. The girls under her control ran towards Li Kong's underlings. She also sensed the Li Kong's upcoming movements. Eventually, the extra knowledge allowed her to strike Li Kong on the shoulder. This strike was much more powerful than the previous one and sent him flying. Li Kong collided onto a tree several meters away before he stopped. His shoulder was dislocated. Hurts. Li Kong spit out a mouthful of blood, but he was still laughing. "And satisfying. Do I get to challenge Yin Kong if I beat you? You are not the one I truly want to fight. The one I want to challenge is Yin Kong." Rui Kong curled her lips and said in a scornful tone. "Oh please. You can't even beat me. What gives you the confidence to challenge, sis? Go back before I knock you out again." Li Kong got up abruptly. He clenched his teeth as he gave his shoulder a hard shake. The shoulder moved back into place, but the pain was obviously intense. Sweat drenched his face. He put away his laughter and said in a serious tone. "I can't go back. It's not my habit to run from a fight once it has started. Rui Kong, I have a mean to break your mental ability." But I really don't want to use it unless I have to. How about you don't use your ability and I don't use that method? We will have a fair fight. Rui Kong shook her head, but she was interested. What method? Don't you think it's unfair? Mental abilities are part of my power just like your muscle. Why should I give them up to accommodate you? Would you feel happy if you win like that? I get it. Li Kong howled. His body trembled violently and his voice sounded like a roar. This is a state I recently came in contact with, don't die. His skin began to harden, transforming to non-human-like. Everyone was shocked. Yin Kong yelled. Damn it. Rui Kong disconnect from his mind. She dashed toward the two of them. But it was too late. Rui Kong screamed as she grabbed her head and fell on her knees. Li Kong entered the fourth stage. In the same instant, an endless sea of violent lust consumed Rui Kong's mind. She had received similar thoughts through Yin Kong before, but Yin Kong always moderated the amount that she sent over. Never once had Rui Kong experienced such a powerful burst at once. The violent lust felt like it was going to burst her mind. Pain, savageness, insanity came in all at once. Li Kong's body finished its transformation. The hardened skin made him look like a humanoid lizard. Seeing Yin Kong was running over, he gave a crazed laugh and said, Perfect timing. I have wanted to fight you long enough. He smashed his fist at Yin Kong. The two were still 10 meters apart. His smash broke off a tree on the path and sent it flying at Yin Kong. Yin Kong was filled with anxiousness and regret. If she didn't let Rui Kong fight alone, the two of them would have ended the fight in less than 20 seconds and things would not have progressed to this stage. She kicked the incoming tree without holding back. Bang. The tree was crushed to bits. Yin Kong disappeared among the shattered bits. No one caught any traces of her except Li Kong. He smashed his fist out and Yin Kong appeared at the same location as he expected. The series of actions happened in just a blink of an eye. Yin Kong was 4 meters away from Li Kong and nearly 20 meters away from Rui Kong. Li Kong stood in between the two girls. If you don't want to die, the smile was gone from Yin Kong's face, only ice-cold killing intent remained. Get away. Li Kong's eyes seemed lost. His voice was hoarse. No, I want to kill. Suddenly want to kill you, so much air. Insanity overtook his eyes. He dashed at Yin Kong with a roar at a similar speed that Yin Kong displayed. He's fast. It's not hard to avoid him, but I won't be able to save Rui Kong after avoiding him. He seems to be lost in the insanity of the fourth stage. It's going to be hard to pull him back. Do I have to kill him? Yin Kong's heart skipped a beat. As Rui Kong came into her sight, her eyes became sharp as a blade. She relaxed her hands in preparation for an all-out fight. Rui Kong and Zui Kong. Let me bear all the sin. As the thoughts flowed through her mind, she saw a group of people running over from the distance. These were probably her team members coming to aid them after hearing the noises. If she couldn't solve the situation, there could be 2 or 3 monsters in the fourth stage and her team would die. She had to risk her life. Come. I will end it in a minute. Yet, she had no confidence on the time limit she imposed. Li Kong also reached the fourth stage. Furthermore, the berserk state he was in raised his power by at least 30%. She had to take risks in order to attempt to end the fight within a minute. Li Kong had gone completely insane. His eyes were red as blood. Saliva drooled from his lips. He looked like someone in a seizure if it wasn't for the insanity on his face. He crossed the few meters distance between him and Yin Kong in an instant. He smashed his fist forward without any technique, but the wind pressure accompanying it was enormous. Yin Kong had a realization that she couldn't block this strike. Yin Kong was stronger than Rui Kong after all. She didn't back away. She moved half a step to the side. Li Kong's fist barely scraped by her shoulder by a few millimeters. At the same time, her hands grabbed Li Kong's neck. What enormous power! I feel like my shoulder is going to break apart. But he has lost his rationality. He isn't using most of his assassination techniques and lacked cautiousness. He lost. Before Li Kong was able to retrieve his hand, Yin Kong kicked the ground and leaped over Li Kong, bringing along his neck over his head. With a snap, his head twisted to the back. The neck section of his spine fractured into bits. It wasn't likely that he would live. Yin Kong did not give Li Kong a second look after she landed. She immediately ran toward Rui Kong. However, a powerful wind pressure came from behind the moment she lifted her foot. It was so sudden that she was flying the instant she felt pain from her waist and collided onto a tree. Li Kong was standing behind her with his head still snapped behind. He didn't die. The tides of a battle were constantly changing. Zheng attentively observed. The berserk of Li Kong was unexpected. He made a rough estimate and concluded that Li Kong was still quite a bit weaker than Yin Kong. He decided not to appear and interfere at the time. It was a difficult task to explain where he came from. When Yin Kong one-shot Li Kong with ease, he cheered for a second before he saw Li Kong was still alive and smashed Yin Kong on the waist with a punch. She coughed up blood and was sent flying. Without any delay, Zheng entered the third stage, then emulated Yin Kong's thinking process. Li Kong grabbed his head and neck with his hands, then twisted it back to place. Ka-cha, the bones inside this section of the neck were fractured and his head was in an abnormal position. As Zheng surfaced in the dream world, the skin and flesh on Li Kong's neck squirmed like a worm, gradually correcting the distortion. The rest of the people here cried. The girls recovered from the mind control and looked at the scene at a loss. Only a few remained calm. They were still children after all. When a man suddenly appeared, Those still composed simultaneously surrounded him. The man was no other than Zheng. His eyes stayed fixed at Li Kong, who was deviating from human with each passing second. Li Kong's broken neck slowly recovered. Maybe the bones within were still fractured and the hardened and scaly skin and muscle held his neck in place. Li Kong walked toward Yin Kong. Is that the hibernating genes in his body? Most people in the fourth stage appeared human-like. Only those with the genes of the unknown organisms from ancient times will take such a form. This guy, could his ancestor be a lizard or dragon? Random thoughts flew through Zheng's head. Zheng had made it through many battlefields and never stopped fighting for his life since entering this realm. His experience came from the many life and death situations. As the children approached him, he gave a shout and unlocked the genetic constraint further into the fourth stage. A wave of killing intent emitted from him and shocked the children in place. Li Kong also turned his head around abruptly, staring at Zheng with a pair of crimson eyes. Yin Kong. I know you can still move. Leave the monster to me. Do what you must do. Once Zheng grabbed Li Kong's attention, he yelled. Yin Kong was feigning unconsciousness under the tree like he expected. The damage she suffered was big but shouldn't have knocked her out. To a person in the fourth stage, willpower alone could keep him or her alive. Yin Kong jumped up from the ground. She looked at Zheng with surprise, then dashed toward Rui Kong. Taking his eyes off Yin Kong, Zheng focused his attention at the monster in front. He had the confidence to take out Li Kong with ease, but any little bit of detail could turn around the tide of the fight, just like the assassination technique Yin Kong used on Li Kong. Martial arts were a tool by created the weak to rival the strong. He was stronger than Li Kong, but techniques had always been his weakness. He could only hope that the lack of rationality Li Kong was in also took away the assassination techniques. It would be a shame to get killed by a technique. Come. Show me the power of a berserk fourth stage assassin. Zheng calmly said. He beckoned with his finger. Blood energy and chi began to circulate within. He was ready to activate explosion the moment Li Kong came near and deny him the chance to utilize any technique. The frenzy had stripped Li Kong of his awareness. He didn't know who he was fighting. Instinct seeked the strongest person he sensed. He finally felt a sense of danger when Zheng surfaced. An instinctive danger, like when a beast met a more dangerous beast. He snarled as he walked toward Zheng. His face still looked insane, but his steps were cautious. Ho ho. So you can still sense the gap between our strength even in a frenzy. Zheng glanced over Yin Kong, who had reached Rui Kong. He breathed out, then walked toward Li Kong with a smile. Li Kong stopped at 5 meters from Zheng. His muscle enlarged as if to make a show of strength. Instinct was sending him signals of danger and death if he lingered any longer. He might have ran from this pressure if he didn't went berserk. Zheng wouldn't spare him any chances, whether it was the chance to run or to attack. Blood energy and chi fused into explosion and he vanished from everyone's sights. A trace of a shadow flashed across, then a heavy thump followed. Zheng's fist struck the center of Li Kong's chest. Li Kong's chest sunk in from the front and protruded from his back. Zheng then kicked him off the ground, scraping a layer off the ground surface in the process. Is that it? It's only just started. Zheng gave a shout. His fist struck Li Kong's chest numerous times at unseeable speed. Within a few breaths' time, he crushed Li Kong's chest. If Li Kong wasn't in the air which buffered the attacks, Zheng could have broken him in halves. Still, his heart, lungs, and other pivotal organs were destroyed. He was a goner unless his whole body had transformed into a monster. I finally get what Luo Yinlong meant when he said those words. Stage does not equate to strength. Stage increases naturally, just like how we age. However, strength encompasses much more, like techniques and abilities. If I don't have explosion, this fight would have taken an hour. Zheng stood beside the dead body as he recalled his conversation with Luo Yinlong in The Lord of the Rings. Suddenly, he felt a rock flying toward him. He stood there and took the hit, then turned around. Yin Kong was staring at him with a cold expression. Wait. Am I not helping you? Zheng thought Yin Kong loathed him for killing Li Kong and explained. I had no choice but to kill him. He was attacking you. Whatever, there's no point in explaining. He stopped. Something was not right. Yin Kong's eyes were bloody red. Her facial expression wasn't twisted, but it appeared that she went berserk. Rui Kong stood behind Yin Kong. She pointed at Yin Kong with one hand and at the other children with the other. Her eyes weren't red, but instead, over 80% of the eyes were white. Did the violent lust consume her mind? So she is in the Heart's Devil state. Zheng knew that the first time a person encountered the Heart's Devil, they could usually survive after venting out the insanity. Back in Resident Evil, he killed hundreds of lickers, but he didn't die from exhaustion. However, the violent lust that poured into the mind at the time wasn't much less than the actual encounter of the Heart's Devil. Rui Kong had just sustained the mental impact from Yin Kong. The wave of violent lust from Li Kong when she wasn't prepared consumed her mind and pushed her into an encounter with the Heart's Devil. This was the other method to bypass the Heart's Devil that Zheng thought of, trading one person's life for another. The people that was running over finally arrived at the battlefield. They were Yin Kong's team. And the person leading the team was Zui Kong. That's our basic situation. Including the statue pieces from the Japanese army, we are still missing one piece. Xian's voice came through the silver plate. After Wang Xia and Hung assembled, they followed Xian's order and easily obtained the statue pieces' location from the Japanese officers using the mind control device. During the process, the Japanese army suffered devastating losses from Wang Xia and Hung due to Cheng Xiao's instigation. Over 70% of the army were incapacitated with a mortality rate of over 50%. The Japanese army still remaining on Chinese land were less than 50,000 at this point, a huge shrunk in its size. Xian was well aware of the group's actions. Although Cheng Xiao's was worried about him possibly denying the group from going too far, Wang Xia knew Xian wouldn't stop them. Xian had already planned something far worse. Defeating the Japanese army was such a peaceful act in comparison. Of course, the long-standing fear brought Cheng Xiao and Hung to notify Xian before they acted. The response was they were allowed an hour of attack before they must retreat. At the same time, the statue pieces couldn't get damaged in the process and Cheng Xiao had to record the battle with the silver plate. Just open up the plate. Everything seen through your eyes will be transmitted to the plate telepathically and I can accept the information. Xian said. The group of three didn't understand his reason. Xian wasn't someone bored enough to watch them defeating the Japanese army. There must be an underlying reason. Was he planning to broadcast the battle to other people? To their surprise, they guessed in the right direction. Xian didn't broadcast the battle but gave the view to Chiang Kai-shek. Zero left his silver plate to the men before he left for Zheng location. Once Chiang Kai-shek confirmed the validity of what he saw, he announced to the world through radio that the Japanese army had been defeated by the Eastern Immortals. At the same time, he ordered the front line to pursue and attack the Japanese army. An army without backups, supports, supplies, or even commanders could only end up annihilated. Next, we are going to Tokyo. Xian said to a silver plate. On the other end were the leaders of the Kuomintang. The noises died down on the other end. A long while passed before a voice came through. Are you planning to massacre Tokyo as a revenge for the Nanjing incident? No. Xian straight up denied. We will sink Tokyo, along with its land. There were sounds of things dropped on the floor. A voice asked in a panicking tone. Why? Isn't it too much for a revenge? We should be lenient when it's possible. Perhaps. Xian interrupted the man. I need the Buddha statue. There is still one piece missing and only 1 day and 2 nights between the 7-day limit. I cannot find any more information from the given intel. So let the world end with everything. It will begin at Tokyo, then we will cross the Pacific Ocean and destroy North America. Another group will start at the Soviet Union. Once these two continents are destroyed, we will move to Asia and obliterate all of mankind. Xian's tone carried no anger, like he was talking about what was for dinner tonight. The people on the other end of the silver plate though were drenched in cold sweat. They looked to each other as if they had just witnessed something ghastly. A long pause followed before Chiang Kai-shek said. What if you find the last piece before the time limit comes? Xian adjusted his glasses. We will begin with Tokyo and stop when the last piece appears. And if it still doesn't appear after mankind is wiped out, there's no need to say anything beyond this point. He was straight up threatening the other party. They might as well think of Team China as terrorists. Though terrorists weren't much of a thing during this era. Knowing the power Team China possessed, these leaders had no way of stopping them. Schemes were nothing more than a joke when faced against overwhelming strength. Team China had no need for any scheme. They just needed to display their strength and announce their intimidation. No power in this world could stop them. Xian's intention for speaking with Kuomintang was to have them relay the message to the world. Once the powers throughout the world verified the destruction of Tokyo, changes would come. He had a 60% chance of obtaining the last piece. To avoid the party or individual with the last piece from holding it because of fear of revenge, let them know that we will not seek revenge. We will reward them with authority, wealth, power, and even the path to immortality. Relay the message. Mankind will decide by themselves whether they should be rewarded or destroyed. The conversation ended. Xian then relayed this message to all kinds of parties within Shanghai. Some merchants cried when they heard of the destruction of the Japanese army and kneeled facing the north. These merchants were patriotic. However, the people's reactions didn't differ much from the Kuomintang leaders when they heard the rest of the message. And then the rewards mentioned at the end turned their shock into determination. Some underworld leaders were glimmering in their eyes. Shanghai was crowned the city of sin during this era. It was the most prosperous city in Asia. Anyone who had power and influence here had a standing in the world. Government intel and spies could catch a lot of information, but so did the local organizations. There was no harm letting civilian organizations know of this message. When destruction approached, mankind would burst their potential beyond anything they expected. One could only hope this potential could save Team China from this bonus mission. All the details had been set in place. As Xian was ready to leave for Dongbei, Zero contacted him. The yellow turbans appeared 5 minutes ago. The gap before their attacks are 7 hours. They reached within 100 meters of me in the last attack. I fear that I can't block the next wave. Secondly, something is happening to Zheng. His body is rolling around. Qi and blood energy are ignited within him. I am afraid something's going to happen to him. Zero spoke his intention. Xian pondered for a while then replied. I don't have the manpower to give you at the moment. The final plan commences soon. Our mission is equally important. Defend with all you have. It will be solved if Zheng wakes up. As for his abnormality, it's better than nothing happening, as long as he is still alive. That's the situation. Don't contact me again before I reach Shangzi as long as no one dies. Zero asked in a hurry before Xian folded the silver plate. Wait. Tell me what's your final plan? Xian explained without hiding any detail then folded the plate before Zero could respond. On the other end, Zero's group was still in a shock. They had not seen the power of the magic cannon, so sinking Tokyo was acceptable. However, obliterating mankind was on a different level. He turned it off so fast. Did he feel guilty and afraid that you will try to stop him? Tenyi said. Zero folded the silver plate and shook his head. Probably not me. Zheng isn't dead yet. He's just sleeping. What if he hears the plan in his dream and wakes up? Xian doesn't worry about anyone else. But Zheng is impulsive and naive. He won't give up on something until he sees the end. Zheng has beaten him several times already. Yet, with only 2 days left, can he draw out the last piece with his final plan? Whether the plan succeeds in bringing out the last piece isn't the question. The probability hovers between 60 to 70%. If we don't obtain the whole statue by the 7-day limit, we would be erased either way. We might as well take the gamble. Xian said to the people in front. Hung, Chengxia, Wangxia, and Yanwei stood in front of him. They had over 30 hours before the time limit was up. Xian left Shanghai, where he had stayed the past few days, and came to the northeast. There was no longer a Japanese-occupied area in this region. With the defeat of the Japanese army, the northeast region became lawless and chaotic. Deserters, bandits, and refugees formed the paintings of hell. These small-scale riots happening among its citizens were not something the team could stop. Get it? This is the reason I disagreed with you defeating the Japanese army in a large-scale battle. Xian calmly stated. The cruelest laws are still better than a lawless state. Zhuliang in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms also spared Cao Cao's life. Once the region falls into a chaos, the destruction that follows will be worse than the war itself, but since you have already done it, you can only wait until the two political parties take over this place. Hung, Chengxiao, and Wangxia nodded without a word in response. They were excited when they defeated the Japanese army. It was like fulfilling a revenge. However, they were dumbfounded and panicked at the riots that came after. They didn't know the rationale behind the chain reaction. They could only watch as the chaos contaminated the whole region. In just a day, hundreds of thousands of people died. This number continued to climb with each minute. There is no way to end the chaos with normal means. The only possible way is, Xian said in a serious manner, to suppress them with a more shocking news. Cheng Xiao quickly asked. What kind of news? To kill a whole city of rioters? Xian shook his head. That will only drive the situation downhill and ignite riots in non-affected areas. Deserters and routed Japanese soldiers are still on the run, so it's not possible to stop these riots. You need a news that can shock both the rioters and Japanese soldiers. What do you think of the sinking of Tokyo? Hung, Chengxiao, and Wangxia sighed as they silently accepted Xian's proposal. They couldn't come up with any objections. They were scouring for a reason to stop Xian before he arrived, or at least reduce the casualties that would be involved. The hundreds of thousands of Japanese citizens in Tokyo were innocent. Yet, with the riots occurring in the northeast region, they couldn't find any words to say. Human nature was selfish. People of their own country were more important than people of other countries. They couldn't spare the mercy to the Japanese in comparison. The 5 people boarded the sky sticks and headed toward the ocean. Hung thought about leaving Yanwei behind, but a powerless woman in this chaos wouldn't be safe. He had no choice but to bring her along. The Japanese islands appeared on the horizon after 2 hours of flight. The sun was rising, and looking down from above, they could see a silhouette of a city on the island. Near the location of the city's harbor were numerous tiny dots. Those were the ships idling outside. Xian piloted the sky stick down, and the other 3 followed right after him. As they came near the surface of the ocean, they noticed Xian wasn't flying toward the Toiko harbor. He was heading for a ship that was some distance away. The group was interested in why Xian wanted to intercept the ship, but before they could get their heads around, 2 gauze pistols slipped into Xian's hands. He raised his hands as if entering into Gunkata style. The 3 men quickly flew their sky sticks in front to block him off. Hung said, "Don't kill any more innocent people. Our goal is only intimidation. It should be fine to let these people go even though we are going to nuke Tokyo." He had the mentality of a normal person. Both the massacre that happened in China and the nuke that would happen soon were triggered from distance. He wouldn't be able to stay determined if he were to kill so many people in such close range, despite the fact that he had overcome his weakness. Xian frowned. Seeing this, Cheng Xiao quickly said, "We are going to need people to relay the message after we nuke Tokyo, right? Otherwise, the powers over the world wouldn't see our intimidation. I know what you are thinking. There are spies in Japan, who will send the message out. However, have you considered the power of the magic cannon? What if it's too powerful that it sinks the land the spies are on? Or if it breaks the crust of the islands? No one will be able to send a message out. This ship should have the ability for telegram. We can keep the ship intact, then the people on the ship will send a message out." Xian retrieved the pistols. Hung and Cheng Xiao let out a sigh of relief. Then they heard Xian said, "I was going to shoot a few holes on the deck. But if you insist, you can do it. Make 4 holes slightly larger than a horse's hoof and as deep as the hoof goes. For the placements, follow this horse." He brought out the weird-looking magic cannon, a cannon sitting on top 4 skeleton horse legs. While Hung and Cheng Xiao couldn't find anything to say, the ship stopped. The group gained control of the ship after Wangxia and Xian killed a dozen sailors. It was a crew sailing toward China. Aside from the sailors, most people on board were tourists of various nationalities. So it was easy for the group to seize control. Hung and Cheng Xiao dug 4 holes on the deck. They had to use their hands and arrows to dig the holes. And it wasn't digging on soil. The deck was made of steel. Even with Nanto Suchoken and enchanted arrows, the task was strenuous compared to a few shots from the gauze pistols. By the time Xian and Wang Xia came out from the cabins, the ship had turned to face Tokyo. The legs of the weird cannon stood inside the holes. Tourists crowded behind the deck and watched Team China from the distance. Some couldn't hold themselves from laughing at the weird-looking cannon, a steel shell covering a horse. No one could think of it as a high-tech weapon, not even the members of Team China themselves. I think Zheng's heart must have hurt so much. He really liked the nightmare. With Xian's alteration, he would probably cry every time we use the magic cannon. Cheng Xiao said in a low voice. While Cheng Xiao was bringing up the conflict between Xian and Zheng, Wang Xia said. Xian, how is the recoil of the cannon? These legs seem so fragile that they would collapse at any second. Can they withstand the magic cannon's recoil? That's not an issue. The magic cannon is built on the horse because it could negate gravity. As long as its legs are fixed in the holes, any excess force will be dissipated onto the ship. Now then, fire. Xian calibrated the magic cannon's aim to Tokyo Harbor. He then inserted a ring into a hole on the cannon. Light flowed on the surface of the ring like water. He brought out the spatial storage bag they obtained from Adam in the Lord of the Rings. The bag was filled with rank C and some rank B energy stones. Xian grabbed a handful of energy stones and shoved them into the barrel. As he pressed the buttons on the cannon, the light on the ring exploded in intensity. It radiated like the sun, burning everyone's eyes. Only those who had enhanced their bodies could keep their eyes open. Even then, as the brilliance grew, the Team China members slowly narrowed their eyes. The collision of Zheng's blood energy and Qi can erupt into an unimaginable force. The principle behind explosion and destruction seems to be a form of annihilation reaction. He recently condensed his Qi into refined Qi, which possess a quality and effect over 100 times more than Qi. My question is, if Qi condenses into refined Qi, what does blood energy condenses into? The light coming from the muzzle grew even more intense than the light from the ring. The members of Team China could no longer keep their eyes open. They closed their eyes, but a slight burning pain lingered. It was a strange light, a stream of black light and a stream of white light entangled onto each other. Normally, there shouldn't be black light. However, that was the color radiating from this energy. It is indeed possible to condense blood energy. I call the resulting energy magic. Refined Qi and magic have polarizing attributes like yin and yang. The collision of these two energies triggers annihilation. If Qi and blood energy generate something as powerful as destruction, what kind of force will refined Qi and magic generate when they collide? A black and white beam shot out from the magic cannon. The beam began at just over 10 centimeters in diameter and grew into 30 meters as it traveled 1,000 meters away. The collision within the beam became increasingly volatile and sparkled off light in every color of the spectrum. The beam looked like it had transformed into a rainbow. Yet, its existence was not nearly as beautiful as its appearance. Every living object in its way broke down into molecules, or perhaps not even molecules remained. The energy beam's diameter grew into 1,000 meters by the time it reached the ocean right outside Tokyo Harbor. An enormous explosion occurred as it vaporized the water and the harbor. Then it shot through the land, erasing everything on its way and leaving only a trail of smog behind. Tokyo no longer existed. The intertwining black and white colors were the visible forms of refined Qi and magic. Every collision between the two increased the amount of energy that was released. The law of conservation of energy still held true. This type of energy increase was more properly explained by the conversation between mass and energy. Such conversion was much more powerful than the release of energy taken place in a typical hydrogen bomb. Hydrogen bombs converted less than 1% of its total mass and the resulting explosions enormous. Imagine a conversion that turned 100% of mass into energy. There was a joke that you could bomb the Earth with a chair. A chair that was completely converted into energy would probably have the power to blast the Earth to pieces. This was the reason the energy beam started slim and grew to over 1,000 meters by the time it reached Tokyo Harbor. Its color hadn't turned into pure white yet, which meant fractions of refined Qi and magic still existed separately. However, the team could no longer see the reaction happening inside the beam once it shot into the land that Tokyo was on. It was still expanding as it traveled. The slightly dimmed energy beam still carried a force that was unrivaled even after it traveled into the ocean and underneath the island. By the time it stopped expanding, the diameter had reached 10,000 meters. Energy became unstable and the beam appeared extremely volatile. It finally exploded deep beneath ground level. The huge explosion traveled through the earth to the surface. With a deafening explosion, the people could see a giant piece of land blasted off into the air. It seemed as though the land had covered the sky. Revealing underneath the land was light bright as the sun. An enormous ball of fire was blazing up. Its size could no longer be gauged by the eyes. The members of Team China squinted their eyes hard and could only make out a silhouette of the fireball. They glanced over Xian by chance and almost passed out in fury. The glasses this dude had been wearing somehow darkened to the shades of a pair of sunglasses, allowing him to stare straight into this blinding light while the rest of the team were squinting their eyes. That's cunning. No wonder he always wears those clear glasses. He has been expecting this test fire all along. Cheng Xiao denigrated Xian again. He could have kept the words to himself, but he had to speak it out at a volume just loud enough for Xian to hear. Hung and Wang Xia had no energy for him. Their eyes were fixed at the blazing fireball in shock. The only thought that remained in their minds were, fuck. They had witnessed the power of nuclear bombs, although only tactical nukes. The true power of nuclear bombs were recorded in many accounts in the real world, powerful, but the affected area was still measurable with the bare eyes. This explosion seemed boundless from where they were standing. Its diameter had exceeded the size of Tokyo. Destruction beyond the fireball affected an area 10 folds larger. The land crumpled from the impact of the shock wave. The shock wave continued traveling further and blasting land and everything on its way up to the sky. Its power gradually diminished with distance, but still, it surged waves 100 meters high when it reached Tokyo harbor. Everyone, or actually, the members of Team China all turned to Xian in an instant. It was easy for the team to leave using the sky sticks before the waves reached them in the next minute. However, that would abandon this ship of witnesses. Who else was there to witness the fall of Tokyo? Judging by the power of the magic cannon, perhaps the whole island was going to sink into the ocean. The Lambda driver was the only wide-scale defensive ability the group possessed. Xian determined whether they would keep the witnesses alive or fly away. There was nothing the rest of the members could do in this situation, and so they left the decision to fate. The cruise had sailed quite far away from Tokyo harbor. The nightmare could ignore gravity, but it couldn't negate the recoil from the shot, which was dispersed to the cruise. Fortunately, the force induced by the refined chi and magic wasn't strong when they left the barrel. It only pushed the cruise a few thousand meters away, even farther away from the harbor. All the normal people on the cruise were still in shock, not knowing that death was close by. Everyone watched with their jaws dropped. The fire had dimmed and the blinding light was blocked by a layer of immensely dense dust. Yet, they knew that Tokyo was gone. Whether Japan still existed was also a question by the looks of the destructive force. In an era where nuclear weapon hadn't been introduced, a volley of cannons was the most magnificent sight to behold, but it was nothing compared to the scene that was like the end of the world. The Caucasians murmured their god's name as they believed God had sent a divine punishment to the world. When the huge wave was 1,000 meters away from the cruise, a deafening boom reached the people's ears. The sound of the explosion only just traveled to the cruise and it woke everyone from the shock. People yelled and screamed as though their lives were on the line. The cruise was so insignificant underneath the 100 meters tall wave. People uttered their final cry of despair. Xian quietly reached for his glasses. Those who were closely paying attention to him let out a sigh of relief. He had decided to use the Lambda driver. What was the limit to the Lambda driver? Perhaps not even Xian knew. He didn't have the opportunity to test its limit. The level that he had discovered was shocking to him already, if he had such emotion. Upon activation of the glasses hypnosis, Xian's eyes became resolved and zealous, like hot-blooded young adults who would do anything for their friends. This expression coming from Xian was piercing to the eyes to look at. The members of Team China frowned. A Xian without emotions was scary. A Xian with emotion seemed even worse. They couldn't guess what kind of person he would become like this. This hot-blooded Xian gained the foundation to use the Lambda driver. Whether his beliefs were fake or not, the power the Lambda driver displayed was profound. As the wave came crushing toward the cruise, a layer of dazzling light blocked the water at 50 meters away. No matter how mighty the wave seemed, it couldn't break through this thin layer of light. The wave then pushed the cruise further away from the harbor. People could finally make out a mushroom cloud in the distance, and the island Tokyo was on could no longer been seen. Perhaps it had disappeared from the earth. When one possessed power so enormous that it ignored any techniques, this power would be the simplest solution to every problem. Even though Team China had just killed hundreds of thousands and perhaps 1 million people, the team members felt a little excited. The magic cannon's power proved beyond anything they had imagined. Nuclear bomb seemed small in comparison. It was on par with the Continental Oscillator that could be used as a mean to bring an end to every party. Actually, they might not even have to die in the process. It would become a simple solution to any upcoming movies, barring the unexplainable ghost genre. One shot would put an end to the movie, or if there were any team battles, just fire a shot at the other team. Points would come rolling in. Points. The power of the magic cannon is linked with the energy stones used. I used 7 rank A energy stones, 22 rank B, and 100 rank C. We have used up half of the items we obtained from Atom. If you want to farm points, go exchange a similar quantity of energy stones and you will reproduce this power. Xian told them the truth. The truth tasted sour to the rest of the group. The cheat to farm points was nothing more than a delusion. If they had the rank rewards to exchange 3 rank A energy stones, they might as well combine them into a rank S reward and exchange a cultivation manual. The magical items of a cultivator would probably be as powerful as the magic cannon. Although the dream of using the magic cannon to farm points was shattered, their plan proceeded smoothly. The people on the cruise was going crazy because Wang Xia explained their intention and their plan to destroy North America. He let them know the only object they wanted was the Buddha statue's piece. If they couldn't get the piece, mankind would end in annihilation. The tourists on the cruise included Caucasians from several European countries. They demanded the captain to broadcast everything they had seen using telegraph. In the danger of annihilation, every human erupted their potential. 40 minutes after the explosion, every major government watching this affair received the information of the fall of Tokyo, and Team China was flying toward North America. 1 day and less than 2 nights left before mankind would be wiped out, 29 hours before the 7-day limit.